Welcome to the Grassroots Army Podcast. This platform is for common sense people looking for up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information without the hot garbage corporate media bias. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. And don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. Good morning, my fellow Michiganders. Good morning, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army Podcast, where I am your host, of course, Garrett Soldano, covering the hot garbage that continually comes in with every 24-hour media cycle. It just continues to get more interesting, folks. And so we're going to get right after it today, because I saw a video that Dana Nessel put out. Now, look, here's what's interesting about this video, and I'm going to comment on it before we show it. I think if this was her personal video on her TikTok or her Twitter, and she's just doing these things because she's very proud to be a part of that community, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a good video if you believe in that kind of stuff. She's very happy. She's running around with the pride flag draped over her shoulders. She's playing with bubbles. And you know what? If that's you, that's fine. I don't care. The only problem I have is with this is you're the Attorney General of the state of Michigan. They're kind of like there's a professional standard with that. And so when you go on into your place of business, where we the people, not all of us, but the majority of us, unfortunately, put you into that office, and you're dancing and prancing around with the pride flag, you're kind of just like shoving it down people's throats that may not agree with that. Which, you know what, on your personal stuff, I think that's totally fine. If you can stand up for what you believe in, this is America, absolutely. But when you're going in your place of business where the people voted you in, then you have to remember with that comes some standards. With that comes from some professionalism, excuse me. And so I just don't think it's professional for you to do that around the state capitol and kind of put it in everyone's face. I don't care, but a lot of people are probably going to take offense to that. And I think as an elected official, you just should hold yourself to a higher standard. Now, look, this happens on both sides of the aisle, which I've always told you. I will call out the right just as much as the left when they do stupid stuff like this, okay? Which, again, you're not representing your entire constituents. You're representing your echo chamber. And I think a lot of people are just sick and tired of having it, being force-fed down our throats, especially our children. So I just don't think it's the right time. Again, your own personal profile, prance around. Be proud of what you believe in, because this is the greatest country in the history of our species. So let's get to the very cringe video that she put out yesterday on her platforms. Here we go.
Come to pure LGBTQ Michigan.
Because we are moving forward on equality and not moving backward.
No matter who you love, how you identify, or how you express yourself, you have a place here in Michigan. Michigan, a state you can be proud to call home.
So again, and she threw the glitter in there, which I think is absolutely fantastic, is the glitter. Hey girl, right? So again, I think the video is cringy. I've made cringy videos. It's not a big deal. I got my wood chopping videos that I love to do that just fires up the liberals and everything else, which is fine. But again, I'm not an elected official, right? So again, I think if you do it on your personal platforms, I think that video is perfectly fine. But when you're the Attorney General, it's just not professional to throw that in people's face and go around, because here's what I want to point out. The gentleman said, we're moving forward on equality, not backwards. And I just reflect back is, especially in the state of Michigan, even throughout our country, it's the whole country's moving forward with it. I mean, the majority of folks really don't care about people's lifestyle, about what they do in the bedroom. Back in the 80s and 90s, yeah, I think they did, and people were discriminated against, and we kind of went through that. But now in today's environment, like, nobody cares. And for you to the really try to put out there that there's a problem and that we're leading this charge and we have our pride flag in front of us and we're moving forward on equality, not backwards. I don't think the majority of Americans really care what you do, who you sleep with, who you marry. I mean, there's some people out there that are very set in their religious ways, and that's their beliefs, and you have to respect their beliefs and values. You don't have to agree on it, but we have to all get along in America. So I think, the flag that you should be truly waving would be the American flag, which stands for diversity, right? We come from a very rich background of a lot of different people and folks from different backgrounds and beliefs and experiences and cultures. And that's what makes America great. So I just don't feel that you need to wave that flag around the state capitol. There is a flag that's already waving on the top of the pole that demonstrates that. Not in the past, but it's evolved into having diversity. And that's something to celebrate. There's no doubt about it. But I do still think it's funny that we see all these folks going around gays for Palestine. Somebody really needs to sit them down and talk about what happens to folks that are a part of that community over there. I don't think they understand that their group would not be approved upon. Let's say that. But it's really interesting how this group, and if you want to follow somebody, follow Gays Against Groomers. That is a great community of people who are standing up against the grooming and stuff that the LGBTQ plus have evolved into, and they're very upset that their community was hijacked by a bunch of crazies, and that's what we're seeing today. And so I would like Dana Nessel and Governor Gretchen Whitmer to respond to the Gays Against Groomers and what they feel about that group and organization, because they're obviously not very happy with where this organization has going, or where this organization is going, because it's almost like a cult. It really is. And I got it right here. A cult can be defined as a system or community of religious worship and ritual. And a lot of the things that they do is very ritualistic. And, they call us MAGA folk cults too. We're cultish. So, yeah, that's where we're at in our society, I guess. So I just feel that you probably shouldn't have pranced around the Capitol, because what if a Republican elected official pranced around the Capitol with, a Christian flag? Liberals would lose their minds, right? Cities would burn, which is kind of quite comical. I want to point out, because somebody pointed out on social media the other day, that when Trump got convicted of the sham trial, the 34 counts, did cities burn? Were there riots in the street? No, they just went out and raised over $54 million in 24 hours. So I just wanted to point that out. There were not even any protests whatsoever, no burning of buildings, no defacing of statues and everything else. No, they just went out and raised money. Two different types of people, two different types of actions. I think one is better for our country than the other. So Dana Nessel, cute video. Would have loved to seen that on TikTok, just not the state capitol in there. So let's move on to Fauci the clown. You all know how much I despise Fauci. And he got his butt whooped. He really did. Dr. McCormick really held him accountable. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, held him accountable. So I want to get to those clips right now, because I have a big show planned for all of you today. So let's talk about this first one right here.
5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fauci, you were quoted on CBS Face the Nation saying it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci?
I am a scientist who uses the scientific method to gain information.
Yes, you said you represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci? Yes
Again,
or no? Yes or no?
No, that's not a yes or no
Yes,
answer.
it's a yes or no.
I don't think it is.
Okay, well, we'll take that as you don't know what you represent.
Oh,
But this, as director of the NIH, you did sign off on these so-called scientific experiments. And as a dog lover, I want to tell you this is disgusting and evil, what you signed off on, and these experiments that happened to beagles paid for by the American taxpayer. And I want you to know Americans don't pay their taxes for animals to be tortured like this. So the type of science that you are representing, Mr. Fauci, is abhorrent, and it needs to stop. Mr. Fauci, you also represent the type of science where you confess that you made up the COVID rules, including
I didn't hear what you
6
said.
feet social distancing and masking of children.
I never said I made anything up.
You admitted that you made it up. You
I
made it
didn't
up
say
as you went.
I made it up.
So are you saying this is fake news, Mr. Fauci?
I didn't say I made anything up.
What did you say?
I said that it is not based in science and it just appeared.
But this is science.
What does dogs have to do with anything that we're talking about today?
These are scientific experiments. This is what you signed off on. But you also told the American people they had to distance by 6 feet. They had to wear masks. But let's also talk a little bit further about the type of science that you represent. NIH scientists made $710 million in royalties from drug makers, a fact that's been hidden. Let's talk about the fact about, is it right for scientists and doctors getting paid by the American people, government taxpayer paychecks, to get patents where they're paid millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in royalty fees, especially when the NIH and these government agencies, most powerful agencies in our country, are recommending medical suggestions and advice and making up guidelines like 6 feet distancing and masking of children. Do you think that's appropriate? Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci? Because you're not doctor, you're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes. No, I don't need your answer. I want to talk about this right here.
Mr. Chairman,
Fauci,
objection.
I reclaim my
Mr. Chairman,
time.
objection.
I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time, Mr. Raskin.
Gentlelady will
Point of order.
suspend.
Mr. Chairman,
Point of order.
just in terms of the rules of decorum, are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license. As a matter of fact, it should be revoked, and he belongs in
Gentlelady will
prison.
suspend.
Man, she gave it to him. That is for sure, which she has every right to. But I want to point out, now here's where I'm going to play the devil's advocate. She was holding up a couple pictures of some beagle dogs in some experiments, allegedly, that they were doing that were funded by the government. Okay. So let me give you a little lesson about big pharma. I've worked in facilities that do just that. So if you take any medication from big pharma, anything, right? 9 times out of 10, almost all the time, those drugs are tested on animals, rats, monkeys, mice, pigs, and your lovable beagle dogs. Okay. So any medication, not just what the government does, this is big pharma, folks. If you take any medication, that's your cholesterol, that's your pain meds, pretty much every single one has been tested on animals. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't know if you take any drugs, you may have or not, but we have to keep things broad here and understand that animal testing goes on in all those medications. And still to this day, I haven't worked at that facility in, 25 years, but I was in charge of animal studies where we would dose, and it's horrible. It's the Holocaust of animals, and I don't agree with it. And I worked there when I was in college, and it's horrible, the things that I saw and the medication that was getting pushed through, and what I saw and witnessed what it was doing to these beagle dogs. And it was probably the most horrific thing that I've worked at for over a year, and it took a part of my soul. There's no doubt about it. But that is done with all big pharma. So if we're going to hold that kind of person accountable like Fauci for testing on drugs, then we got to hold big pharma, folks. Just giving you the truth, which I do. So let's move on to Dr. McCormick, which had some very damning audio of Dr. Fauci. Listen into this.
Chairman, it's been insinuated that
politicians, only bloggers, only conspiracy theorists are disagreeing with you. I want to point out that I'm probably the only member of Congress that actually treated patients during the pandemic from the very beginning to the very end of the pandemic, during night shifts in the ER. Thousands of patients during that time. And in 2020, I was censored. My medical license was threatened because I disagreed with bureaucrats. Literally taken off the internet as a person who is treating patients with leading edge technologies, developing theories, but doing my very best, but being censored by the United States government for the first time, stepping in and taking the place of medical professionals as the experts in healthcare. Any dissent surrounding COVID-19 treatments, mask mandates, and any public policy surrounding the pandemic was immediately labeled as anti-science. I watched as public health officials and politicians told my patients what treatment options were best for them, regardless of their comorbidities or their medical history. Despite my education and my training and my experience, my opinions were relegated to conspiracy and misinformation by so-called healthcare experts who had never treated a patient throughout the entire pandemic. This has been a black eye on the medicine and has highlighted why government should never insert itself in between patients and their healthcare providers. The American people deserve to make medical decisions through conversations with their physicians rather than politically motivated mandates. Dr. Fauci, did you ever treat a patient for COVID during the pandemic?
I was part of a team that was at the NIH that took care. We didn't take care of many of them.
Okay, so not hands-on. Got it. Thank you. Why would I be criticized by a bureaucrat for doing my very best as a healthcare? This is a rhetorical question. But why? Why would the government, who's never treated a patient for COVID, you can read all the things you want, but you're not there. You're not seeing patients. You're not watching people die, intubating patients right there with that disease in your face, watching it happen, watching the development of this disease and actually learning from it. But I'm being told by bureaucrats what's right and wrong. And what's funny is everything I was censored on, I was proven to be right. Pretty crazy, isn't it? You said in an interview that you gave as part of an audiobook written by Michael Spector that you believed an institutional should make it hard for people to live their lives so they'd feel pressured to get vaccinated. Could we run the audio clip on that, please?
You think can be done about it. I have to say that I don't see a big solution other than some sort of mandatory vaccination. I know federal officials don't like to use that term.
Once people feel empowered and protected legally, you are going to have schools, universities, and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Lady, you're going to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us, you get vaccinated. And it's been proven that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological bullshit and they get vaccinated.
Thank you. Are all objections to COVID vaccinations ideological bullshit, Dr. Fauci?
No, they're not, and
Thank
that's
you.
not what I was referring to.
Well, in reference to making it hard for people to get education, traveling, working, I'd say it very much was in context. And I take great offense to this. Miss Allison Williams testified before this committee about losing her job because she sought an exemption for ESPN's vaccine mandate, which came from recommendations from bureaucrats like yourself. She and her husband were actively working with a fertility expert, a physician, on how to get pregnant, and agreed with the premise that she was young, healthy, wanted to get pregnant, and shouldn't get the vaccination for medical purposes. But she was fired because you made it hard, just like you said in your statement, because you didn't want to make sure that the ideological bullshit got in the way of her working, of living her life, of making a medical decision with her healthcare professional. I think America should take great offense to this. That's exactly what you meant when you said making it hard for people to live without getting a vaccination. You affected people's ability to work, travel, be educated, to actually flourish in American society, to self-determine, as we're all given God-given rights. Shame on you. Dr. Fauci, you've become Dr. Fear. Americans do not hate science. I don't hate science. The American people hate having their freedoms taken from them. You inspired and created fear through mask mandates, school closures, vaccine mandates that have destroyed the American people's trust in our public health institutions. This fear you created will continue to have ripple effects over generations to come. You have already seen its effects in education, in the economy, and everything else. Quite frankly, you said, if you disagree with me, you disagree with science. Dr. Fauci, I disagree with you because I disagree with fear. And with that, I yield.
Oh man, I know that just fires most of you up out there, and it just gets us so upset with what has been done to everyone like us who stood up. And again, I'll continue to point out that all of us who have been standing up, we have been proven what? To be 100% right. Oh, we're just a bunch of conspiracy theorists that are batting 1,000 right now. And it's horrible, and I won't let up, even though the Dems and a lot of people just want to brush this all underneath the rug and just come out and say, we did the best that we could with the information that we had. No, you didn't. You released this to take down a sitting president, and then you ran with a narrative. And I've said this time and time again. In the beginning, I really feel that everyone has a get out of jail free card with this thing, even though I will stand that you should never, ever bypass the Constitution. You shouldn't. And lockdown and everything else, it should have been a choice from the very beginning. But as the science really started to come out, and then you censored it on corporate media and social media, and you silenced medical doctors who were actually standing up for some therapeutics and stuff in the beginning. And then you ran with a narrative that was proven to be false with the mandates and the lockdowns and keeping kids at school or at home from school and everything else. And I can go on and on and on. The science was changing, the science was adapting, and there were some tyrannical people that continued to force these things. And there were some states that were fully open, but you all on the corporate media and this progressive left Marxist communist movement was silencing them and attacking them. So I can go on and on because that is my wheelhouse, is COVID and the lockdowns and everything else, because I lived and breathed it every single day. And for those of you who've been following me for 4 years, know this. And so I will not let up with exposing this, because all of us took a lot of hits, a lot of hate. A lot of our businesses got shut down and canceled, ruined people's lives. Elderly died in old folks' homes and nursing homes and everything else because of an agenda. And that's why I will never forget. And that's why I will continue to update you with all this. So moving on to our clown president, the weekend at Bernie's candidate and his executive order to finally do something about the immigration problem. Now, look, I, and like many others, were highlighting this over a year ago, where all these people were just flooding in. And actually, my YouTube channel of 239,000 subscribers got taken down because I was exposing the border. And I was talking about everything that was going on. And so I got removed, right, for violating community violations of hate, right? Just because I was exposing what happened at the border. So a year ago, we all noticed and knew that there is a huge problem on how these illegal immigrants were getting funneling all throughout our country. Okay. And so he signed an executive order to say, yeah, we're going to deal with it now. So let's talk about, because I saw this on Fox News this morning, about some of the things that this Biden's executive order does. Okay. It obviously shuts down the border after a consecutive 7-day average of 2,500 plus encounters. Look at that. They're following data again. Oh gosh, it just flashbacks to the hell of data, science, and tests, right? Will stay in effect until 14 days after there has been a 7-day average of less than 1,500 encounters along the border. Still allows 1.8 million illegal migrants to enter per year. Okay. Will not apply to visa holders, unaccompanied children, victims of a severe form of trafficking, those using the CBP One app, and those who face an acute medical emergency or an imminent threat to life or safety. So obviously a lot of loopholes and stuff in with that, but goodness gracious, this is just them just trying to do something because his polling numbers continue to plummet. And here's Senator John Kennedy absolutely roasting Biden's executive order on immigration. Listen to this.
Okay, I want you to listen up. Here's the drill. President Biden is in trouble politically. He's polling right up there with fungal infections. Part of the reason for that is that he gave in to the loon wing of his party, and he dissolved the southern border. Now, 5 months before an election, he has to appear to be willing to do something about it, hence this executive order. And he expects you to report this epiphany that he has had, take what the White House is telling you, balance it on your noses like trained seals, and report it uncritically. For 3 years, we have watched President Biden push on a door that has been clearly marked pull. He's mismanaged Congress, COVID, the national debt, the economy, inflation, crime, Afghanistan, Iran, the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, and now, of course, the border. And every time, I think the president has hit rock bottom. He has managed to find a shovel and continue to dig. Hence, this executive order. And I think that's what the American people see. The first question I would ask President Biden is this. It's a little late, isn't it, Mr. President? It's a little late. You can't make this cat walk backwards. The president's border policies have allowed 8 million people to come into our country illegally. If you try to come into our country today illegally, you're a sucker. All you have to do is present yourself at the southern border. Now, for 3 years, President Biden told us all, there is no crisis at the southern border, for reasons clearly stated on the teleprompter. And his plan to deal with the crisis at the border, pretend that there wasn't a crisis at the border. Some of you reported that. Some of you didn't. Well, when the American people figured it out, because they may be poorer under President Biden, but they're not stupid, the Biden administration shifted its strategy. It then said, well, we know there's a crisis at the border, but we don't have any authority to fix it. That didn't work either, because the American people aren't cell deep stupid. So now he has decided to tell you that he has been born again. He has had an epiphany. He is now a border hawk. And that's what he wants